many occasions and multiple times, many different scenarios. I'm going to try to offer more information, more knowledge from what I found on what's going on in the industry and historically what the story is. The background is we really have to go both the history of wine and halachic. What are we looking for? What are we looking for? Let's go back to initials. Ma Pinchas, the first guys al Yain, the same. Then you have a repeat, Daniel, right? And then we have all of a sudden kicking in. Then we have, if you want, you can get in. I was very excited about this chiddush. You have Mordechai serving wine by Sudas Achashverosh, I believe. I was driving when it was Machadishis. Why was Mordechai serving it? So it should be Yain Nesach. Whose wine was he serving? Answer was Yain Yosef. It was older than who the people were. There's only one wine historically talking about pre-700 years ago, 700 years ago, that would age. That was what today is called Ashkelon wine, Gazan wine, and it would chip. All other wine, you'll see Rishayim, they already discuss it. Rishayim discuss it. Oh, everyone discusses it. After 6-7 months, you come to your wine, it's not good. So that's what Mordechai was serving. But again, it was the Gzeir of Daniel, and then all of a sudden things start changing. There's the Gzeir of Misham Avodah Zarah. So what are we, throughout, you're going to see this, it's constant movement, motion amongst the Ramah, the Mechaber. Are we discussing Yain Nesach, Mishum, is Gzeir Mishum Yain Nesach, because of and this Mishum Takruvas Avodah Zarah? Are we dealing in this with the Rabbanan? And obviously the implications of what we are what it is, will play a big role in the halachic outcome. Another very interesting part, it seems like Avodah Zarah was kind of Masech Sasim in Ashkenaz. I did find it very funny that I was giving a chazmur in Ashkenaz because one of the Yeshiva is Masech Avodah Zarah was come out of Masech Sasim, and they went with a lot with the minig. So again, how weit are we stimming? Are we going to stuff what the minig was into the Bible? Or are we going to just say this is what it was? And you'll see there's Rashi, but talk about the Siyah. But a little more on let's get down to more of the detail of what's transpiring throughout, with barrel. Generally, everyone jumps straight into the show. You can't discuss a step back. Let's look at what a barrel is, where it came from, and why sherry cask is used. And there's other barrels too, right? There's Cabernet. I have wine finished in Cabernet. I have wine finished in Pinot New York. Where did everything come from? As we say, is it an Alma de Shikra? And it's all branding? Or is there something here? Right? Or is it both? It's a wide open playing field. Barrels historically were used for everything. They were used for transport of gas, for making herring, for aging, and everything that was the natural vessels that you use for transport. In addition to that, the way they close a barrel is not with the metal hoops that we have today. They would take a vine, wrap it around, and the vine would dry up and tighten it in place. It wasn't foolproof, by the way. There would be leaks. You'll give your barrel over to a wagon driver to transport it. If you're trying to deal with it, you're going to come across it. You push it a little aside, you take out some wine. There's no cops around to give you a ticket for drunk driving. Is the Shashya Nesach? And there again, is that the reason why there was the rabbin held, might be in the name wrong, that you have to put it into a sack? Is that the reason? That he held? But there was definitely, that was Mitzias. Let's go over to what was before they started using wood. They used Klicheres. Klicheres was before. And there was another palm tree. It was also used in Bavel, which is not in use today. So the way they used palm, I believe, was they would hollow it out. They didn't have the slats on the side. It wasn't cut up pieces. So there's just different ways of transport, different material, which led to different facts. The wood used is generally speaking the local tree, right? It's the easiest way. So you'll get called white oak. Can't pronounce the Greek term for it, but there's generally 4 different trees used. In addition, to make spirits, you'll use wine. When you're in a wine region, you'll use grain. Gotta have a drink, right? At least in the Gaisha cup, which is interesting. Um, that for many years, the most prevalent was wine and everything else. Again, you'll find why wasn't there Xer on other spirits? Because wine was the most prevalent, one that they drank. Or, I mean, sorry, wine, because it wasn't that, etc. This meant that they'll take the wine was the most cautious, was the one you use first, you ate the cognac. Which leads another part is distilling wine, right? If your wine is the most cautious, then the next would be a brandy, a cognac, distilled wine, right? And that's just important why when we get to sherry to understand. You take the wine, you'll distill it. Whiskey distilling is a very simple process. It did take them, it was only Mechadish in the year 1400s, which is also important to know when we get to the Gemara that says that Yayin is nice and poundless, Lifkam to beer. But if whiskey was only first distilled in the 1400s, it's actually about Shem Tov that writes that, listen, son, this is my banner. The Baal Shem Tov writes that the Kadosh Baruch Hu, 2 things. We'll go through both of them. One, he writes that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave Parnasa to Klal Yisrael after Gal Svarad through whiskey. Right? If you look in Europe and Poland, I think 40% or a crazy number was the Kretschmann. They were all involved in the industry, in the spirits industry. It's crazy numbers. And the other one Baal Shem Tov says is that we're going to greet Mashiach with our mashgiach, be mekabel Mashiach, and say this is how we survive the Golos. So these are 2 members of the Baal Shem Tov. But the actual distilled spirits only came around 600 years ago. So you have wine was most prevalent. Then you'll have cognac. Whiskey, as we know it today, you have a tshuva, and I'm not here to make a new issur. You have a tshuva, I think it was the Chachma Shleima that says that you can't drink rum on Pesach because you can't differentiate between rum and chametz whiskey. Okay? You want to use this as a parameter? I don't think anyone's going to tell you they're the same if you taste both of them. But okay.
Rum is made out of what?
Rum is made of sugar cane. And the Rizvad seems to hold that it might be a problem. She's not here. It might be Arla. Anyways, so the cognac was the most prevalent spirit until 1872 when there was an anaphylaxia, when the bugs that came over and infested all the vines, and they didn't have any whiskey spirit, so they switched over to whiskey. Now, the prat that will change over here, in this, is wine will always have a year on the bottle of when it was made. Right? Of when it was made. Whiskey is when it's distilled. The reason being, spirits, how many years of age, doesn't change, the fruit does not change year to year. Grain always are not year to year. It has a set taste. Wine is different. Right? Okay. So now let's move to the barrel. I think we covered most of the different types of grains, categories that we're going to be interested in. Corn obviously is like wheat. Every different plant has a different taste. And now let's move on to the barrel. The barrels, before they're aged, come from 4 main species. You'll have the American oak. You'll have the French oak. You'll have Mizunara oak, which is from Japan. You'll have the 4th oak, which is from Spain, which is going to come back to haunt us. Okay, the Spanish oak is very hard to get. There's 2 or 3 distilleries that have the rights to get them, namely Macallan. I believe, I don't remember off of hand which one it was, but Macallan is the one that everyone deals with for sherry cask. Now, the breakdown is when you take wood, every tree, why are they using oak? If you take the regular wood that's in Home Depot. It's called, I don't remember the name. If you look at it, it says on the sign green. There's no tannin in the wood. Tannin is take out a wine bottle. It will say on the side of it, with strong tannins, a little nutty, some almonds, and if you imagine well enough, you might actually taste it. I was speaking to Ralph from OU, and he told me he never tasted black muscat till he read it. Then all of a sudden, every time he drinks, he tastes black muscat. And he says, then he looks at me with the serious face. He says, "So is that the Tom that answers?" I said, "I don't know." He says, "I don't either know." So what's he getting at? Well, he's asking a question. When you look at the label, put your hand on the sherry. Don't see it. If you taste it, don't see sherry. You don't taste sherry. Right? But now that you read on the bottle of sherry, you taste the sherry, right? Are you really tasting the sherry?
Obviously you are, because you're spending money to get the sherry, so obviously if you're maybe you taste it.
No, but black muscat. And who do we judge by? Right?
By that one person from the
one person?
Okay, that one person. If he can't take plus
No,
muscat,
he
somebody sees it.
Durham.
No,
So I worked with a bartender on an article. I had to get through some Michigan gas somewhere. And her whole maracha, she now works at Iago, I believe, Grants. So her whole maracha, and this is that sound, taste, and the sound in the room, the ambience, the decor, and what you say is what makes the taste. That's her whole 100-page essay, which I had no patience. I never read it. I told her I translated it for her to English. I did it, not Google Translate, some other program, and sent her it back. Got what I needed from her, and I moved on. But it's an interesting idea. So this is what I was asking you. Is it the label that's forcing you to recognize? So I approached another person, and he tells me when he sells his whiskey, he always tells me it has a very strong vanilla taste. And he says everyone tastes it. Okay, I don't taste anything. But so back to the tree. So when you cut the tree, they leave it outside for 3 years. That breaks down the tannins, right? Tannins are what gives it a certain element of flavor. That's why they're specifically using oak. Then it goes on to whichever spirit you want to use it for. The standard process is to age it American bourbon first, because American bourbon has to always use a new barrel to keep people employed. And then they'll send it off to Scotland, and from Scotland, about 70 years in there. Okay, so keep track of that. It has 70 years. You can imagine how many times don't we drink Kamachava. I'll pass on that one. It starts off in the U.S. It goes to Scotland. Once Scotland has it, it's in the U.K. It will travel onwards to the rum countries. So you go 1, 2, 3. By the time it leaves rum country, it's usually 50, 60 years old. That's when they get rid of it. You could basically put a toothpick through it. I tried to drill a screw into a rum cask that was 40 years old, and that thing was mush. There was no grip, which is important because you'll see that alcohol, when you put alcohol into a barrel, it loses, alcohol is you clean the floor with it, right? It eats away at what's dirty. It's used as a sanitizer, which means it eats away at what the barrel is made up of, which means it absorbs, right? And it absorbs an awful lot. So we're taking these barrels. Let's follow the trail. Comes from it. We make it in the U.S. We're using Kentucky oak. There's different trees. We're not going to get involved in the grains. Let's leave that on the side. It's not important. You take the oak, cut in Kentucky. You make the barrels. You put in the bourbon. You hope the bourbon's not a problem with Pesach. You then move it onwards to Scotland, right? You age the Scotch in it. Now you can imagine the alcohol goes into the oak. The oak has a flavor. It has cellulose, a sugar. It has the char, which is it's a filter. It's other flavors. A lot of the vanilla that you get comes from the sugars. It exchanges, goes into the bourbon. That's why bourbon ages much quicker. and then you ship it off to Scotland. Scotland then goes ahead and puts in the whiskey, and that's why Scotch should be much lighter. Until 1983, I did some research. There's no mention of the Royal Roy's, both these books. They said the symbol of a good Scotch is a light colored spirit. Read it for you. A liquor Scotch whiskey is won through proper aging and blending. It is mellow, soft. The whiskey's okay. It's in here if you want to see later. But the point was, there's no mention in both of this. This was the Encyclopedia of Whiskeys until the 83. These were like the established books. There's no mention of anything of sherry cask. Every barrel, wherever it came from, the standard practice was, and is still today, to take the American bourbon barrel, the most prevalent on the market, send it off to Scotland. It's a thick wood. Use it. It will give a light flavor. Blend and do whatever you want. Now, there were some little distillers in Scotland, and there's always a shortage. Everyone's always trying to put each other out of business. Nothing changes, right? They needed oak barrels. You can't get oak barrels. It's a little tough. There were local bars. Today, we get everything shipped to us in glass. Starting really in the 40s until 1986, the sherry was always transported in barrels to whichever stores are going. Sherry is a wine that has to be grown in the Jerez region of Spain, maybe one or two other regions, and will be shipped to the consumer in a barrel. Now, interestingly, it was never shipped in the original barrel, the Olroso barrel. Olroso barrel we'll get there, is much worse than the sherry cask. The sherry cask was a thinner wood. They'll transport it to Scotland, and after the bar would finish the barrel, the local distiller would say, "Hey, you got some leftover cardboard boxes, equivalent. Can I use them?" And they'll fill them up. Right? Now, who was using it? You gotta save a few bucks. It was nothing to be to brag about at that point. You didn't buy the expensive American-made oaks, you bought the cheapest oak barrels. That was roughly till 1986 when they outlawed the barrel. Now the store, shipping Jerez, they said all wine of sherry wine has to be bottled in Jerez, Spain. They got the hang of it. You make more money if you bottle it yourself. And now these barrels are no longer to be found. Now we're going to get onto the story, and we'll probably, two different stories to understand what happened. The story goes, that they'll tell you, is that all of a sudden they realize there's something missing in the whiskey, right? And they would say, "What is it? What happened?" It's the sherry. So they try to pump sherry into the barrel to get the same effect. Didn't work. Right? They tried to blend in sherry. Didn't work. Oh, we got to age sherry in to get that flavor. That's the story they try to tell you to give you the importance of sherry. And it might be accurate, I don't know. Now, if you look at the other textbooks, it says no mention of sherry cask as being a good flavor until that point. The quality of a good scotch was a light scotch. It was light in body and easy to drink. As time went on, people get bored, want something different. So they started looking. Now at a marketable, clientele that wanted something different. What's an easy way of giving something different? Taking a different barrel and adding a flavor. Why? The law is, and the law is always a sugar check, right? I couldn't resist. The title of this law book is called Inside the Minds. Okay? So your whole game is to figure out what the guy on top, your inspector's mind is, and go like this. So the law is, you get a barrel from the U.S., you get a barrel from anywhere, you could reuse the barrel, right? One caveat, as long as there's no spirit in the barrel. Right? It has to be empty. So, now we also have a demand for more spirit in the barrel, right? And for more differences, things to be different. Right? So, you'll go ahead and you try to stand out, look different. Sherry has a sweeter flavor, It gives it more body, it gives it more color. Though they've been using caramel coloring for quite a while. Hopefully it's the kosher ones. Carmine's illegal. Remember, not everyone's pistas. Yours hachait over here in this money, in this industry. But let's assume everyone's keeping within the rules. Where are they going to go? They're going to go head up to sherry. It's been used. They know it gets past the laws. They've been using it for 100 years. Can't get sherry. They call up their local, sherry maker. And we're assuming right now, just for now, sherry cask, port cask. And they say, we need barrels. They said, barrels? We're not giving you our Olroso barrels. The way they age sherry is a very different process than what they do with whiskey or other wines. It's a pyramid of sorts, and they rotate starting from the top to the bottom, all the way down to the barrel they're empty. And you never empty a third more than the other one. So you could have wine and barrel on the floor, the X barrel, since it could be theoretically 200 years old. And that's how they get consistent blend. Again, I never tried it. It's not kosher, but this is what they'll tell you. Those barrels, if you're using a barrel for 200 years, it's not going anywhere. It's there for 200 years. We're dealing with wine. The oak, when the alcohol goes into the barrel, it's not like a floor, like alcohol doesn't it dissolve in wood as much. And with time, they write that the barrel now becomes it's just wine. It deactivates the oak, the wood, and really just gives a time of wine, the Olroso barrels. They're not getting those. The distillers have to make a panas, right? Have to stand out. They can't taste like everyone else. They came up with an idea. According to law, wine has to age, sherry has to age for 18 to 24 months, right? In the barrel, in order to be called sherry. Every alcohol has a certain minimum period to age. Almost every single one. Sherry wine has to be in the barrel for 18 to 24 months. What they did was they made barrels, and you'll see this on barrels. People think and they condition the barrels. They came up with a better term. They call it seasoned oak barrels. Right? They put in the wine. It's 18 to 24 months. They empty the wine, and then they send the barrels off to the cooperages. To the distillers. So, not so fast. Where are they getting these new barrels from? They're using new barrels this time, right? For years, sherry you would think.
So what's the chiddush? They're making their own wine? That's not what you mean, right?
They're making wine. Oh, sorry, I should have continued. Then they take this wine. When you have a vineyard, there's hundreds of thousands of pounds of grapes, just tens of thousands that are psilus. Right? So what they do is usually you use it for floor polish, whatever they do, distill it and use it for whatever purposes. What they do now is they use that to spice the barrels, and then when they're done using it to spice the barrels, then they throw it out. They take all that wine. For the most part, it's not wine. It's disgusting. It's all gimmicky. Some might have better, some might have worse, but for the most part, this is the purpose of it. They use this wine. Then they throw it out. So these barrels at this point...
Why are they called seasoned? What's the name? Why are they their new name?
Because they're trying to differentiate between... It's not really sherry. That's the answer. It's not...
But it did the scope. It did the minimum 18 months. So why is it not sherry?
Because people think seasoned sounds better. It's all a gimmick. I'm doing this or you're doing that. Now, sometimes they'll empty it all away and fill it. When you transport a barrel, you never leave it empty. Because the wood shrinks. And if it shrinks, it leaks. And then you got to refix it. It's a real headache. So what they do is you leave spirits in it. So if you have a barrel with whiskey in it that's 50 years old, and you want to get rid of that barrel, send it to Jamaica from Scotland, they're not leaving in a gallon and a half of transport whiskey from 50-year-old whiskey. They empty it all out, and they pour in a Casel's bland spirit, which is either Zaxanite or vodka, but it's nothing of note. Now, let's stop for a second. What sherry's in the barrel? Are you drinking the sherry? Are they going to bottle it? No. It's a cheap sherry to transport. Right? It doesn't cost anything. They're getting rid of it. So that's one thing that's changed post 1986, which barrels the wood changed. Another thing that they've realized, which is the opposite, is what oak are they using, and which distillery are we generally talking about when we discuss sherry cask? We're discussing Macallan. Macallan only started writing this book over here, has all the fancy whiskeys. I think it's like 1979. None of them, it doesn't mention Macallan. You ask any kind of sword, what's the best and the best of Scotch? Macallan. Macallan's right to fame started in late 1980s. Right? They started using what you would call Macallan as their vehicle to stand out, to be different. But there's two other very active, two different components that they have that others don't have. They have the rights to what's called Spanish oak. Right? Spanish oak comes from the Galicia region of Spain. The Galicia region of Spain is a natural preserve or something. Basically, you can't cut down any trees. They have rights. They're allowed to cut down. So, and on top of that, the barley that they use is called Golden Harvest. Golden Harvest is an outdated barley. They don't use it anymore. Anyone else? Because it's difficult. I mean, it's not difficult. They ate it for 1,500 years. No genetically modified barley, or they don't call it, I'm sorry, the crossbreeds, not genetically modified, have a different taste. So now what are we dealing with? Is it the same animal? Is it the sherry? We can't look at Macallan for directions. But one more thing that differentiates them. What happens when you distill? Right, you have the way it works is, maybe I should have done this in the beginning. A whiskey still separates the alcohol from the water. Right? Or from the wine. What's the wine? We'll let everyone find it out. But is it the non-alcoholic part of it, or is it the alcohol part of it? You can see two of us arguing. But the alcohol rises. The water, which boils at 212, drops. Alcohol, which boils between 172, depending on gravity, atmosphere, or whatever that word is, rises and goes over the neck. However, sometimes the chaverim, and they stick together, they travel up and over the neck. So you'll always have water when you distill. Some will come out at 60 degrees, it's 60% alcohol from the neck. If you have a really long one, you get much higher. Macallan uses a 40% neck. Meaning it comes out with a lot of water. That water is a water that fermented with the Golden Harvest grain. Just give you it's much grainier. Just more of this, the opposite is the kosher Glenlivet. I'm sorry, Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie, whatever they pronounce it, IE at the end, is a very light Scotch. Am I wrong? You know the orange bottle? That one has the tallest neck in the industry, which means it comes out with the least extra flavor of the corn, so of the barley. So back to Macallan. It's very hard to say, hey, I taste, even though every mumcha and expert can tell you I taste the sherry, but are they tasting the barley? Are they tasting the shorter neck? Or are they tasting the different barrel that they have, the different oak? Now, let's go over to the next one. So there's those that are advertised as sherry bombs. What's a sherry bomb? As I'm sure they come much money. You might think it's wine. They take this barrel after it's conditioned. This is when we're dealing with a conditioned barrel. They take that barrel. They don't resurface it. Very often, you want to resurface the barrel. Meaning you clean it out, you char it, and then fill it. They then just put all the whiskey in. Now, we went from Spain to Scotland with a gallon and a half of wine in it. Right? They're not taking out the wine, they're not putting in the clear liquid. Rabbi Belsky, I hear this from two steers. It's a steer. I'll give it to you. Said that he saw the wine pouring out, and he doesn't understand how it could be mutter. That's what he told the Rav Avihu. On the other hand, I heard from another Rav that said told enough that said that Rebelski told those that don't want to drink the sherry cask could drop them off at his house on Purim so he could drink them. It's not so shvek because maybe he holds can't give a hechsher on it. Right? Okay, so that's how the sherry bomb works. The wine is very prevalent. It's a very strong case of wine. Honestly, if you want, you could even argue they pour wine directly in, even though it's not legal. Again, everyone has to make a pranasa. How many times do you speak? You know the inspector that comes to your plant. You become good friends. Remember, you're selling alcohol. It's not hard to become friends with the inspector. Okay? And this is how it works. The Scotch, in particular, how do they support their economy? Of the sale of Scotch. There's no incentive, really, for the inspector. It's not like Chalav Stam. There's not FDA. There's no incentive for the inspector to cause problems. Okay. Anyway, so that's the story with the sherry bomb cask.
Is this well known in the industry that they do what they
I have a shuvah from one of the Chayim that he said I asked the blender. There's two types of whiskeys. There's a blend and then there's a single cask. He's mechalech. I hold it's all about business. But he writes and he asked him and the guy told him, what do you mean it's illegal? So he said, but do you do it? He says, what do you mean it's illegal? Okay. That's your answer. I'm making nothing. Okay, so this is what we're discussing. So how much
you didn't know what they got, what the whiskey maker?
What?
There's
no shkach. He went on a fact-finding mission. Right? So now,
there are those that do it, let's say the Sagot winery, they have like a red wine or a Felch wine they use. And those Sagot wine barrels are used for the Ochem Doris ones or the Ben Eden ones. All Badats, and one of the nine, they have like all these Badats ones there. They use Sagot winery. Yeah, okay. And that's under supervision. It's not just whatever. It's not.
Which whiskey distillery? Milk and Honey?
Yeah, no. They make sherry casks. They don't call it sherry casks because they can't do it. They know what they use. They know the whole stuff.
Yeah, it could be. I cast. But again, I'm not here to ask. Let's see what's going on. The next step is to look at the sherry bomb. Olroso finishes you could get busy 1/60th, 1/6, but they're much more they're much more sticky. The next one that they have is either when it's retoasted or second fill. Second fill is like that's what Rasha Weiss is more probably dealing with. When they fill it up for a second time, you don't want it so strong. Statistically, it's 40% of the strength of the first fill. Right? Again, every study is done at one specific distillery, and every single one has their own sheker. So you can't really go from one to the other, but this is how you say. This question, and the third fill is 10%. Barrel lasts 70 years. The question is when you put in the whiskey, and this is what they discuss, is what do you want from the sherry? Right? This was asked to a lot of distillers. And this is really a question, let's go further. The Cabernet finish, the Pinot Noir finish. And some want it for marketing purposes. You gotta stick out, right? I don't know what the implications of that is over here. Ramifications. If it's just for marketing, again, you gotta fill up a store. The more shelf space you have in the store, the less shelf space your competitor has. Right? So when you take this barrel, let's say not dealing with the sherry bomb. Let's leave that aside. How much wine is in the wall of the barrels?
The sherry bomb.
It generally says there's a list. It's very obvious. I'm very proud of it. I've seen it in stores. I also wondered it. You have to be a real Scotch connoisseur. Usually those bottles are much more money.
That's what she's saying for sure.
I won't say, I don't know also much. I'm not getting involved in that. But I'm telling you that when they write sherry bomb, let's stop. What's the purpose of the sherry? That's what we're getting at. If you want to argue that has an effect on the barrel, right, and this is what the conversation is. Why are you taking it? is wine eats away at the barrel just like whiskey does. Now the walls absorb a very high element of wine. Okay, it's more than 1/60th. I had a 30-gallon barrel in the back of my truck bouncing around. I came home and there was a gallon of whiskey in it. So I called up my guy. I said, "Hey, Tachin, have some Mama Maruba over here. Were you drunk when you emptied it?" He said, "No, I emptied the barrel." Okay, he could be lying to me. So I called up by my salt and said, "Can I say over the story? Maybe he didn't do his job." So he tells me, laborers might be lazy sometimes, but you did find the barrel of whiskey in it, and I didn't remember sloshing when I put it in, right? Okay.
The gallon got absorbed in the walls again.
It gets it, yeah, and it's soaking wet. That's what I'm telling you. Initially, when I got that barrel, it was 40 years old of Jamaican rum cask. That wall was soaking wet. It couldn't hold a screw. It was feisty. It was wet. You could have sucked it. And there is something called. It's called. There's Angel's Envy. There's something called the Devil's Cup. The angels would evaporate. What's stuck in the wall, what evaporates first and goes into the wall. This is an interesting part. Is what evaporates at the lowest temperature, at below 172. Let's say 160s, and and that gives a hangover very strong. That's what gets absorbed the most in the barrel. That's a benefit of an aged whiskey. That's mostly evaporated after 10 years in the barrel. Right, so that's an important fact for perm if you drink whiskey and aged wine. So you take this barrel. I don't know, let's take too long. After X amount of year of sherry, right, and the sherry is now absorbed in the barrel. And again, the sherry bomb, clearly you want the taste of sherry. What is the purpose of the sherry in the barrel? So they'll tell you the mivinim, and this again problematic because they've heard different stories that went. But the general assumption is you want the molecule interaction, the removal of the wine removes certain tannins, there's 300 different chemicals in oak barrel that make up the oak. It will eat away at those chemicals because wine is different than whiskey. And when you pour in the whiskey, it will then age differently. It will have a different taste. Right? So what do you want? I'm sure you heard 100 times that they could tell you that it wasn't legal. There's no positive aspect to sherry. Ever read this sometime? It's the chsarin when it's out there. What does that mean? Is the tannins, the wood that's in the barrel, was removed by the wine.
It's not the wine that's giving good flavor.
Not the wine. It's the lack of the other.
And it used to be 300. Now it says 210. That's a different flavor.
Now, let's look at this question. So the words of Minchas Yitzchak's words is Zev Zegarim, am I right? So if I remember correctly, I'm leaving Ramesh on the side, just because the recent tshuva was put out by Minchas Yitzchak's Aiden, and he wrote that he doesn't think his father would agree anymore with being materet. So the Zev Zegarim is only applicable if you don't want what. Look at sherry. Let's go back for a second. Look at the sherry that you go to the store. Are any of them the light look of the scotch that we discussed? No, they're always dark. That's a very key element of here. They want the color there. It's a very important part. Interesting that I had an argument whether they use E-carmine. E-carmine is bug juice to make the color. An important part of whiskey production is it has to sit on the shelf and hold its color. So one ref told me they don't use it's called E160. They don't use E160. It's illegal. It's impossible, right? If it's illegal, it's illegal. We all know that. What's more about the Roman Emperor? They make Xera for 3 days. So they need the color, but e-commerce lasts for 50 years. Sherry is very, very, very much held on to for a long time. But let's say it's real sherry color, right? And that's why it's dark. So that's one we're getting rid of. That's you want it there. That's A for the colors. One thing. The next issue is how we're going to look at the Zev Zegarim, right? We clearly don't have back to our Solero casks. We don't have Zev Zegarim over there. The wood. Yeah, the wood is giving a tam,
Yeah, and the sherry.
and the sherry.
The
Right? It's combined. The by the Solera is clearly not there. There's no wood left, right? By the sherry, let's stop for a second. Sherry is always, sorry, I missed this. The sherry and port, which are the other two prevalent barrels, are always reinforced. They always put in a distilled spirit of sherry or a distilled spirit of port to make it stronger. So there's a double charif element over here. That's a problem. That adds to the halach part over here. But if you look at what's transpiring, what happens is the wine eats away at the barrel, and it's chaser tannins. Are we going to consider that, again, as opposed to being a new chiddush, just missing something? It's as if it's a garment. The other nikud is how are we looking at what's transpiring. This again, I don't have it so worked out. All these times, so it wasn't so well the guys, but they told me in just for the Messias. Yinek looks at me and says, "So sherry cask, what is it?" I said, "Okay." He says, "I said 90% of the original thing." He says, "Second fill, third fill. We can't give a hatch on such a thing like chachila." That was under the conversation. But it seems like that sherry cat that the problem is over here. The sherry is removing something. Now another element is what's initial issa. If you're holding it in some form of tekuvus of zara, it's more chamer. And if you look at the Rishonim, it's very interesting. The Kuda again. I just saw this a few days ago. They treat it as chazer, right? Not as a suffix or a bun. The same zahiris, the same jumping back from is the same. Right, and you see this interesting also.
Where's the chazer?
What?
Where's the chazer?
Where's the chazer? Yeah. But you see this very fascinating. It goes even down to the rivers of Ephraim. Rivers of Ephraim, I was shocked because he's a Kalta Lisbach, am I wrong? If he quotes, and I listen to it, threw me off. Something you're burning. Right? Oh my ears. It's not applicable. It threw me off. The Rivers of Ephraim quotes the Shita that if the guy looks at Yain, you're not going to see some bracha. And he says, you should be like that, even like in a glass bottle. So they're like, oh, okay. So, that's really what my haggish was. Look at
What's that thing to do with the part of the this whole separate thing?
which? No, clear. That's not about the first. He's only mentioned once. The original sheet is something about me. He's only mentioned once, and then it became like that. So it has to do with the stackles of Zara. I'll send you the source. It's very interesting. If you look at Beis Yayin, brings it down the bottom. I think it's Beis Yayin, one of them. Yam Sumuch. So, but after going through it back and forth, it really came out that you wind up like this. That's the conversation. You have the two atayim, 1/6. Problem with the 1/6 question is you want the color. The other one is the heter zevzagarim. You got a problem. Is it really the wood? Seems like it's just that it becomes cost or something. It's not adding. That's it. Yeah. Guys, any questions?
If you suggest, you want to taste it, so why? Why
Heat kind of it's just the cold. That it's not that you want the taste of wine. You want the taste of what was it?